Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to explain the health and safety plan for the food industry. First of all, we try to understand what is a food industry. Any industry that includes any business that manufacture, process, develop, sell food, service, beverage, and dietary supplements. Now, what is a food safety plan? A food safety plan that provides a systematic approach to identification of food safety hazards that need to be controlled to minimize or reduce the risk of foodborne diseases or injuries. A food safety plan is a plan based on the concept of hazard analysis and critical points. Now, there are main two elements to prevention. What is anticipation of a problems and other is nature of necessary strategies for prevention. There are two types of two elements of prevention. Now we try to understand what type of hazard should maybe include in food industry. There are some type of hazards in food industry. First is biological hazards. Second is the chemical hazards, physical or extraneous material hazards, allergenics, allergenics hazards, nutritional hazard, biotechnology related hazard, or novel foods. Hazard identification. How we identify the hazard. Hazard identification is the first and foremost steps. A hazard, chemical, biological, or physical agent in a food that can make adverse effect on the human health. It means that anything which can make adverse effect on the human health is called hazards. To identify the hazard, we must properly recognize the agent that can be responsible for harming human health. First of all, we recognize the agent that can damage or responsible of harming the human health. We can classify them into three major hazards. These are biological hazards, which include bacteria, virus, and parasites. Other is chemical hazard, food additive, and antibiotics. And third hazard is physical hazard, metal, glass, or stone. These are three categories, main categories of hazards. Hazard characteristic. These are some characteristic of hazard. One, hazards have been found. We need to find out. We need to find out the adverse effect. First of all, when hazard found, we need to find that out. We need to find out that adverse effect. We first of all we identify the hazard, then we identify the adverse effects. We must make sure different level of exposures and amount of harm they can make. Third one is for chemical agents, a dose responsible assessment is executed. For biological and physical agent, a dose response assessment is carried out if data is available. Dose response assessment. Risk assessment. Exposure the assessment in the present public exposures in according with amount of consumptions for long period of time. B, monitors. The blending and mixture of ruffled material can cause the contamination of a large amount of a food, which will increase. What is the food consumption? Food consumption is exposure assessment must include the information about the different age groups such as infants, children, pregnant women, and elderly. Risk estimate. Now, general characteristic of food safety risk assessment. A risk assessment should be transparent. A purpose of a risk management should be executed separately to enhance the practicables. Risk monitors and the managers should engage in the constant contact through the risk assessment. Risk assessment must accompany structures and the systematic procedure. A production to the consumptions. A risk assessment must take review if needed. A risk assessment should be reviewed and update as the new information requires. These are some general characteristics of food safety risk assessments. Managing health and safety. A safety management system framework for the food can guarantee administrative consistency to ISO norms by the effectively controlling the dangers and risks all the food cycle. Separate crude and cook the nourishment to the frustals, defilling the cooked food source. Utilize the safe waters and safe crude materials. Consider the individual responsible and ensure that everybody does their parts. From worker to the administrator, view of danger, demeanors, and abilities are key deciding component in their training. Occasionally, instructive projects are adequately planned or potentially executed. Subsequently, they don't accomplish the idea target. You should guarantee that you have a sanitation that board the system setup. Managing food handling techniques. These are some handling techniques to manage the foods. You should set up a food handling executor strategy depend on the standard of hazard analysis and critical point control points. Second is a food cleanliness. Third is a bundling and naming. Fourth is a food allergens, and fifth one is a food added substance. Sixth one is a providers recognizabilities, and you should track the organization you supply the food. These are some techniques to manage the food. Record the odds to include name and it should be records odds to include uh, name and address of provider, name and address of business you are providing, kind of and amount of items, and date of exchange and of conveyance. So these are some records of or to be included. Atom withdrawals are reviews. A food occurrence is a place where worries about the genuine or suspected dangers, to the security, quality, or trustworthiness of a food and feed expect the meditation to ensure the purchaser. Withdrawal. What is a withdrawal? At the point when you know or think that food or feed you have provided is either hurtful to well-being, unsustainable for the individual to eat, or does not meet legitimate prerequisites, you should pull out it for the from the deal. Review. The atom could be, what is the review? The atom could be review on the off chance that just arrive at clients ought to be educated to return or discard the atoms. Preparing. Abilities can be acquired by preparing while at the sometimes working. Self-study, patent experience. Pertinent experience. You should ensure that any individual from staff who handle food is prepared in the food cleanliness and the security, including the allergens before they start work. It is a smart thought to track any preparation you and your staff have done, so you will have the option to show this to approval official when they visit your premises. Preparing assets. What is a preparing assets? We additionally give free web-based instruction classes to organization. Allergen preparing, detectability preparing, naming preparing, main driver examination preparing, vacuum pressing preparing. These are some preparing assets. Monitoring platforms performance. What is the it? There are some monitoring performance. Monitoring safety performance is an integral component of aviation safety management systems, and by essential monitoring of result is like the immune system of our SMS implementations. How to monitor? Monitors involve effort and time. Monitoring involve effort and time, but we first created sufficient sources and train the workers properly ahead of time. Monitoring need to be punctual. As for all the other business process, we want to know what happening now rather than at any stage in the past of our food industry. Type of monitoring. There are some type of monitoring. First one is a proactive performance monitoring. The design, production, implementation, and execution of management agreement are the controls. They then these tend to be fundamentally life-saving. For example, a person per month of operates recorded problems, a number of reported proactive problems each month, and frequently between meeting regarding safety. Future actions and improvement ahead of food safety, health and hygiene of worker, training policies, procedures, pest control, hygiene schedules and procedures, and water quality tests. These are some futures action and improvements. Flow diagram: growers plant, harvest, pack, store, and ship. This is a flow diagrams and flow diagram for packers: receive, wash, sorts, pack, and store, and ship. This is a flow diagram for the growers who grow the foods, and this is a flow diagram of a packers who receive, wash, and pack the foods and ships. Increased regulation for the food industries. Food nanotechnologies, product safety, chemical problems, trans fat labeling, contamination of a food, and irradiation, environmental effect, cloning, and food labeling. These are some regulation for the food industry. Now we conclude the whole discussion. We concluded that diseases can cause a several infections sometimes. Risk assessment of a chemical hazard in a food usually lead to options of a risk control option to ensure that a foodborne risk are not appreciable to customer. For the chemical hazard not tested by the mean of authentic model of quantitative risk assessment, every equivalence issues, it take form of a comparison of equivalent safety margin above the conceptual zero risk. So this is all about the food industry and its hazards. I hope so you will complete understand what is a health and safety plan for the food industries. Thank you very much.